Hey, happy Monday or Tuesday. My goodness, it's already Tuesday morning. And can you believe it's almost February? It's just flying by. So, just got back from Nigeria a few days ago. And, we were talking. We actually, as a family, revisited our family vision. If you've not done a family vision, you need to do one. Sit down and go over some different categories as a family. We've got an online course, how to create a family vision if you need that. Whatever you need to do, you need to create a family vision so that your family knows where to run. There was an old prophet, Habakkuk, who was told by God, write the vision down so that those who read it may run. And so we need to know where to run, so we need to write the vision down. But here's the deal. So every day, and for the last few years, we've had these things called devices, tablets. Well, I can't show you mine because that's where Facebook is doing this right now. And then we've got all these tools, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all the way down, right? And all these things were laid out there so that we could be more efficient, more effective, more insightful, more connected, more. And in their availability to become more, what they've done a lot of is actually taken up a lot of our downtime, our rest time, our marginal time. And so what I tell small business owners all the time is when you need to go ahead and decide what you're going to do with marginal time now, because once you get it, once you build all this time and do all this work to build the marginal time, you'll backfill that marginal time with something. And so if you don't prepare now what you're going to backfill the marginal time with, you're going to usually backfill it with things that are not very meaningful and purposeful. And so this is what happens a lot of times with our devices. Am I saying that 100% of our time on our devices is useless, worthless? No, absolutely not. There are some really, really great opportunities that we can leverage these tools for. What I am saying, though, is there's a lot of wasted time and frankly, a lot of time that gets robbed from our families because we're so kind of in tune with the device rather than being in tune with the family. So we tried an experiment last night, and I want to tell you this one thing before I tell you what we did. Is I recently read a book that was recommended to me by Patrice Miles of Care Africa when we were there last week called Crazy Busy. And the subtitle was like a mercifully short book for a really big problem. And the idea was written by Kevin DeYoung, who's a pastor, and he said, I wrote the book not because I've got this figured out, but I wrote the book because I'm trying to figure it out. And in there was a small little sentence, and here's what he said in the sentence. He said simply, if we want to change busyness, it's got to be a community project. So listen to that again. If we want to change busyness, it's got to be a community project. What does he mean by that? Well, if we as a family are going to decide to do something different about the devices, then we need other families to kind of come with us in that. Because think about this. If we decide that we want to put our devices down at 8 o'clock at night, and all of a sudden, dings, you hear all the dings and pings and everything else, we're going to be kind of moving towards that. Whereas if we can get a community of people to kind of generally agree, hey, we as families are going to do this, and let's try to walk through this together. So here was the experiment we did last night. We just said when you get home, let's go ahead and put our devices in a little basket by the door. So we've got this Fulani basket we got last week in Nigeria. We put it right by the door. And so we put our devices, for the most part, in this basket right by the door. And the idea was we would, for 15 minutes later on in the evening, and we would take, and it was whatever you wanted. For 15 minutes, it was like a device buffet, right? You could eat all you could eat for 15 minutes, and it was later in the, so we did it about 8:45 or something like that for us. And in the meantime, what happened was we were able to kind of feel all these impulses like, oh, I need to look at the calendar, or I need to look at this, or I need to look at that, or I need to send this person a message. So instead of doing that, we had a little notepad. And we just wrote down on the notepad when we had that impulse, check calendar for this, send message to this person. We just wrote that down. So when our 15 minutes came, boom, we were able to knock that out. We had all the notifications off. Everything was turned off. And I'll tell you, it was really refreshing. Like, we really enjoyed it. We sat down, we had dinner. There were no interruptions. We played cards. We played basketball. We just did all sorts of, so cooked dinner together. And it was really nice not to, in between cooking dinner and in between basketball and in between cards, to run back to the device and to go back to the device. So I want to really encourage you guys to give some sort of experiment a shot with your devices. If you want to read that book, it's called Crazy Busy. I'll try to put it in the link of this post. Fascinating book. It took maybe 3-4 hours to read it. It's very, very quick. And I think it'll be really impactful for you to read that. But I want to encourage you, and I want to challenge you, and I want you to challenge us. Ask us how it's going. because I want us to be held accountable because we just had a great night last night, quite honestly. And so the experiment's worth it. By the way, we had this conversation yesterday morning, and one of the guys we talked to ran right out, called the local phone company, and got a landline reinstalled at his house so that they had an emergency phone. Because that's one of our excuses, right? Well, I need the phone on. What if something happens? Well, what if something happens? So get a $10 flip phone, get an emergency phone line at the house, and that'll be your emergency phone line. I want you to think about date nights, too, with you and your spouse when you go out. What if you left the phones at home and had this little cheap flip phone that you just took with you for emergencies? So those are things we're toying with right now. Will they work? I hope so. I hope so, because last night was really a great night. So anyway, I hope that helps. Have a great Tuesday. Off to our next appointment. See ya.